Hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. And this lecture is going to cover using SSL certificates with CloudFront. And it's just going to cover a few things that have been coming up in the exam recently. So let's get started. Now, as you saw in the lab previously, when you create a CloudFront distribution, you're going to have a choice of whether to use the default CloudFront certificate or to use your own custom SSL certificate. And if you're happy for users to access your content using the cloudfront.net domain name, then you can go ahead and use the default CloudFront certificate. However, if you already own your own domain name and you want your users to access using that domain name, in our example, we've got www.example.com, then in that case, you're going to need to use a custom SSL certificate, and you cannot use your own domain name with the default CloudFront certificate. So what does this actually look like in the console? Well, it's under distribution settings. So it's the first page that you see when you go to create your CloudFront distribution. And the two choices are here. So by default, it selects the CloudFront certificate. So that means your users will be accessing the content using the CloudFront domain name, and they will use the default certificate. And then the second option is to use your own custom SSL certificate. And you should choose this option if you want your users to access your content using an alternate domain name, such as https www.example.com. And if you are going to use the custom SSL certificate, and you have two choices for where you're going to store the certificate. So you can either store your certificate in AWS Certificate Manager, but if you do that, it must be in the US East region, so Northern Virginia region, or alternatively, you can store it in Identity Access Manager as well using the IAM API. And don't worry, we are going to cover off AWS Certificate Manager and see how to use that a little bit later on in the course. So you will get the opportunity to get your hands dirty using AWS Certificate Manager. But just remember, if you are using Certificate Manager, the certificate must be either created or registered in the US East 1 Northern Virginia region in order for CloudFront to pick it up. And if you haven't registered your certificate in US East region, you will get a similar message to this, just saying the specified SSL certificate doesn't exist, isn't in the US East 1 region, isn't valid, or doesn't include a valid certificate chain. So you will get that kind of error message if you've registered your SSL certificate in the wrong region. So on to our exam tips for CloudFront and SSL. Just remember, if you're happy for your users to access your content using the cloudfront.net domain name, then make sure the default CloudFront certificate is selected. However, if you have your own domain name and you want your users to access your content using your own domain name, you're going to need to use a custom SSL certificate. And custom SSL certificates, they need to either be stored in AWS Certificate Manager, and it's also known as ACM, but your certificate must be created or registered in the US East 1 region. And alternatively, you can store them in Identity Access Management using the Identity Access Management CLI. So that is everything you should need to know about SSL certificates with CloudFront. And don't worry, there is a lab later on which will show you how to use Certificate Manager with CloudFront. So you will definitely get a chance to play around with that later on. So that is the end of this lecture. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.